Hey friends, Zack here. We are officially in the final week of our May supporter drive, and I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who has already decided to sign up. That's 21 of you. Now, we still need 29 more people to say yes to reach our goal. To say yes to these stories of spiritual courage, or to say yes to a small, listener-supported Quaker podcast being financially sustainable, or say yes to ready access to spiritual growth and connection for Quakers and seekers everywhere. We set a goal of 50 new supporters by May 31st, and I'll admit that was ambitious, but I still think that we can do this. And if you've been waiting for the right moment to support, this is it. Because when you join as a monthly supporter, you don't just fuel our work. You get instant access to our entire library of bonus content. That includes the full uncut audio and video of our recent conversation with Parker Palmer, which went live for supporters this past Friday. And now I'm excited to announce that for the first time ever, we're planning an exclusive live Zoom event for our supporters this July. More details on that are coming soon, but you will not want to miss it. Help us reach the finish line. Please visit QuakerPodcast.com and click support in the top right corner. Thank you so much for making this work possible. And now, here's today's episode.
Hey, Zach, welcome back. How was your trip to Ireland yearly meeting?
It was incredible. You know, it's wild. I was there in a foreign country all alone, and within a few hours, it really felt like I was among friends. And I pun absolutely intended. But seriously, Irish Quakers, they just embraced me and they made me feel like I belonged.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I'm familiar with that feeling. One amazing thing about being a Quaker is that you've suddenly got family all over the world. I experienced that in the first season of the podcast when I traveled to Australia, but I've never visited Quakers in Ireland. I'm so curious. What would you say makes Irish Quakers unique?
You know, it's funny. I asked that question to a group of lifelong Quakers at lunch one day. And one of them said, I have no idea. This is all I've ever known, this small community on this little island. You're going to have to ask an outsider.
Okay. So did you find an outsider to ask?
I did. I found outsiders. I found insiders. I found everyone in between. But before I get into Quakers in Ireland and what makes them unique, I need to give you just a little bit of history first.
All right, let's do it. Go for it.
Okay. So, in order to understand Quakers in Ireland, you first need to understand that the Roman Empire never conquered the island.
Oh, you mean like history? Like, let's Wayback Machine here.
Oh yeah, trust me, stick with me on this one. It's important. So, unlike England, Rome never actually conquered Ireland. They didn't come in and build their big walled cities or establish strict top-down power structures. So when Christianity arrived in the 4th century, it didn't take root in the centers of power. It blossomed in abbeys and in monasteries out in the countryside. And Irish spirituality was already deeply rooted in the land and in this acknowledgement of the inherent sacredness of all things. So the early Christianity that took root there, they saw God in everything and they saw God in everyone.
That sounds familiar. Quakers like to say that there is that of God in everyone, but I think the period you're talking about is pre-Quakerism.
Yeah, so you can see, though, that 1,200 years before Quakerism even existed, Irish Christians were kind of already drinking from that same stream of wisdom. Now, I do have to say that over time, the broader church did tighten its grip, but Irish Catholicism has always kept a little bit of that original rebellious streak.
Okay, got it. So what's next? I'm guessing, let's see, then the Reformation happens.
Right. The Protestant Reformation sweeps through all of Europe, but instead of coming via missionaries and teachers, the Reformation comes to Ireland through English conquest. So on the island, Protestant Christianity didn't just mean a different kind of theology. It meant English control, land confiscation, and all the complicated painful baggage that comes with colonial rule.
Right. Yeah. My ancestors were mixed up in there somewhere. So I'm curious how Quakers fit into that whole sort of religious landscape.
Throughout history, Quakers are this kind of incredible third thing in Ireland. They're not the Church of Ireland, then they're not Catholic, but constantly standing somewhere in the middle, offering a hand of peace to both sides. The fight for Irish independence after World War I eventually left the mostly Protestant North and the mostly Catholic South on two sides of an international border, but it never separated the Irish Quakers. They operate as this united all-island community. In fact, their role was so crucial that next week we're doing a whole standalone episode just on Quaker peacemaking in Northern Ireland.
All right. Can't wait to hear that. But if that's next week's show, set us up. What are we hearing about today?
So today, we're exploring both the past and the present of Irish Quakers. For a group that has always been such a tiny fraction of the population, their impact on the island has been enormous. Pretty much everybody I interviewed told me that Irish Quakers tend to punch above their weight, though they said it with a wink because Quakers don't generally punch anyone.
Right. Not notorious punchers, the Quakers.
No, I wouldn't say so. But after sitting with them and talking with them and driving around their cities and getting dozens of hours of audio recordings, I just realized that they have so much to teach the rest of us about community, about peacemaking, and just about hope.
Awesome. Let's get into it.
The Quaker podcast.
Story, spirit, sound.
As I stepped off the plane in Dublin, I was greeted in the way that most people are, with a cold rain and a strong breeze. But by the time that my bus dropped me off in the city center, the sun was shining, the earth was warming, and the Emerald Island began to hum with the sounds of people. And that feeling of kinship and welcome that I mentioned earlier, it wasn't just Quakers. Before I could check in to Ireland Yearly Meeting, I spent a few hours seeing the sights, and everyone that I met treated me like I could have been an old friend. Later that weekend, I sat down with Paul Mooney between sessions. He told me that this kind of radical welcome permeates the very island itself.
Before St. Patrick came, we had the Brehon Law, Brehon. And in the Brehon Law, there is a law called Fáilteachas, Failteachas, Fáilteachas, and it means hospitality. So everybody in the community was responsible for hospitality. So that's why Ireland is Ireland of the welcomes. It's been going on for 10,000 years.
Hospitality might come naturally to the Irish people, but that doesn't mean that peace has always been simple, especially as it relates to religion. For centuries, the lines between Catholics and Protestants haven't just been about theology. They've been about land, colonialism, and deeply entrenched borders. When Quakers first arrived from England in the 1650s, they stepped right into that powder keg. And as Will Hare, the recent clerk of Ireland Yearly Meeting, explained to me, their very arrival was tied to the violence of a colonizing army.
Cromwell comes in with a really draconian campaign and wipes out the Irish forces and really displaces a lot of Irish people from the land. And a lot of the country was fairly devastated. And it's understood that first there were some Cromwellian soldiers, Quakers, who had come in the army, who then, there was a lot of trauma from being in the army. And some of those people became Quaker and became pacifists and gave up and refused to bear arms. And they were in Ireland. But some of their family people started, Quakers who were obviously being persecuted in England, some of them came to Ireland as traders and businessmen. So William Edmondson came at the first one, 1654, comes to Portadown, which is just here in the north, and he's the first one there and starts during this process.
Because those Quakers laid down their arms and refused to participate in the state religion, they were instantly distinct from the English ruling class. But as English settlers, they were also outsiders to the native Irish Catholics. That unique status forced them to carve out an entirely different space in society.
Clearly, we in some ways are in the Protestant tradition, but actually Quakers, the identity of Quakers is seen as somewhat one-off. We're slightly seen as a distinct group, in a certain strange way trusted by both. Maybe we're seen as peculiar, but we're seen as groups that are fair in that process.
Being trusted by both sides is a rare currency in a divided land. But that trust wasn't just handed to them. It was forged in the fire of a national tragedy. In 1847, a devastating potato blight ravaged the island. The poorest communities in the South and Southwest were hit the hardest, as potatoes were one of the only crops that would grow in the wet and rocky soil there. Ultimately, over 1 million people died in the decade that followed, and while the rest of the world played politics and pointed fingers, the Irish Quakers just went to work.
Quakers were heavily involved when there's this disastrous famine, which we lost over 1 million people on the island, and the population, rapidly declined, people migrated. Quakers were heavily involved in feeding everybody, and there was no question. They weren't asking for anything, they were just dealing with a problem.
Other groups set up relief efforts too, but as Alan Brady pointed out, the Quaker soup kitchens operated with a very different kind of entry fee.
But at that time, there was 2 kinds of soup kitchen. There was soup kitchens that would feed you if you were willing to convert to Anglicanism, and there was soup kitchens that would feed you, the Quaker soup kitchens, that would feed you if you were hungry.
But their work didn't stop when the soup kitchens closed. As the worst of the famine passed, Quakers looked at what people actually needed to rebuild their lives. Will told me about the coastal communities, where families had been forced to sell their fishing nets just to survive a few years earlier.
When in the early stage of famine, you sell anything you can sell. But as things were slightly improving, they hadn't got any fishing nets. And the Quakers brought them the fishing nets back for these communities so they could start fishing and supporting themselves. But interestingly, they made them pay a little for it, because it was slightly about dignity.
It wasn't just charity. It was a partnership based on fundamental respect.
And I mean, in fact, if I understand, in famine relief worldwide now, that sort of concept of it's about empowerment, really. Actually, the importance of empowering people and being a process. And the Quakers, even in the 19th century, did see that, but it was about the empowerment of it and equality of everybody in that process.
And that kind of fundamental respect isn't just a charitable blip in history. It builds the kind of trust that pays dividends across generations. Over a century after the famine, during the height of the violent sectarian conflict known as the Troubles, young Quakers were running a children's camp in a dangerous Republican area of Belfast. Will Hare remembers what a local leader of the IRA said when asked if the Quakers were safe to be there.
And he did say, apparently he's reported saying, well, they were fair to us in 1847, so they're safe. I trust them.
Integrity is a bridge that takes decades to build, and that commitment to radical equality, the idea that you don't have to change who you are to be fed, to be helped, or to belong, it didn't just stay in the 19th century. It's the beating heart of Irish Quakerism today. Freddie Higgins is an 18-year-old Quaker from Dublin. They were raised Catholic, but as they got older, the church didn't quite feel like a place where they could truly be themselves.
And then when I was 11, maybe, I sort of began to realize that I was queer and that I was non-binary, and I felt that the sort of vibe from the Catholic Church was not great. And the vibe from other Christians, from what I could see, was not great. And I felt like I was sort of not even like devoid of God's love, but sort of devoid of ever finding acceptance in a spiritual place. And so I just stopped.
For a few years, Freddie drifted away from faith entirely, until at 14 years old, they stumbled across a YouTube video about a young disabled woman who went to a Quaker meeting.
And I was like, that's really interesting. Like, here was this church that believed that everyone was fundamentally equal on a divine level. Like, everybody had that of God within them. And more than just like, that means queer people are okay, that means anyone can speak. You know, all people's voices, and children's voices especially, are valid. And I think we struggle with listening to children's voices in Irish society. And so it really attracted me in.
That core belief that there is a divine light in everyone is what anchors this entire community. It's a theology that Alan Brady, a lawyer who recently became a Quaker, takes incredibly literally. So literally, in fact, that he got a tattoo of it on his arm in Irish.
So what it says down here is ag fragart lunar day atá inan ulig. So ag fragart answering lunar day, the light of God, atá inan ulig in all of us, that is in all of us. Lunar is a very kind of old-fashioned Irish, or the word you would use, like if you turned on the light, is solace. And so lunar is, it's like the light over the window when you come home from a journey, or the light of the sunrise. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a kind of a spiritually connecting light.
As he showed me the stars that accented the piece, he explained that the elements that made our bodies were forged in the hearts of ancient stars. And so we are, all of us, made of stars, of the lights in the cosmos.
Because ultimately, the problem with us and them, from a friend's theological perspective, is like, there is no them. Like, there's only us. We're all made of stars, you know what I mean? The same spirit moves all of us, so we're all the same. We're all equally valid, and it's, those dividing lines are kind of anathema to so much of what Friends are all about.
Seeing that exact same light in everyone is a serious challenge in a divided land. But to understand how Irish Quakers pull this off, you have to understand the religious landscape of the island itself. While much of the Western world has rapidly secularized, Ireland remains a deeply spiritual place. As lifelong Quaker Felicity McCartney points out, religion here hasn't faded away the way that it has for their neighbors.
Irish Quakers have a wide diversity, but it's a different diversity to British Quakers, because Irish people are more spiritual. Our Celtic ancestors were more spiritual as well. And so we don't encounter the sort of anti-religious thing. I mean, there's anti-religion, but it's more about anti-structures rather than anti-hearts, you know. So although we have, of course, some Quakers in Ireland who would count themselves as non-theists, so we do have a diversity, because some Quakers are more, in quotes, religious than others, and much more Christian-based.
Irish spirituality has long held this tension between faithfulness to the particular and openness to the other. Paul Mooney told me that long before modern ecumenism, the island's spirituality was already a natural blend of traditions.
And when they came, they met the Druids, and the bards, the singers, the filly, the poets, and the Brehon, the judges, had already been holding space with the sun and the land and the trees and the soil and the water and the animals for 10,000 years. So there's a very natural and easy transition between the ancient Druidic roles into the monasteries.
That natural blend created a cultural DNA that is completely comfortable being both Jesus-centered and open to other expressions of spirituality. Today, Ireland Yearly Meeting is one united body across two countries, holding both liberal and evangelical meetings under a single canopy. How do they manage that? While denominations across all religious traditions seem to be splitting over hot-button political issues, and the world is becoming more polarized than ever, how can this small body of friends lead us to a more united future? We'll find out after the break. On this show, we often talk about how everyone's spiritual path is unique. And recently, I caught up with one of our supporters named Eva, who is no exception. Her path to Quakerism started on a bicycle in eastern Maryland.
I was biking around the neighborhood, biked by the meeting house, and I thought, I don't know anything about what that means.
Before she ever walked through the doors of that meeting house, Eva did what most modern seekers do: research. She started reading, watching videos, and listening to this podcast, among others. And the more she dug in, the more things just started to click.
As I kept reading, everything really resonated with me. It was like, oh, I've always been a Quaker. I just didn't have a word for it.
When Eva finally did attend a meeting, she saw a need and immediately stepped up, offering to start a first-day school program for the kids so that other families like hers could also find a spiritual home.
It's been great. It was a mostly older community, and everyone's been very grateful for little ones coming in the door. Although my meeting's been really supportive and trying to make sure I also get a chance to sit through a full meeting and not just lead first day school.
For Eva, that time in silent waiting worship is just absolutely vital.
And there was just this sort of intangible quality that I couldn't replicate at home by myself. Even if I had even with the daily meditation practice, it didn't feel the same as when I sat with a group.
Eva's been listening to The Quaker Podcast since the very beginning, about 3 years now. It was an important part of her finding her spiritual home. But for a long time, she simply wasn't in a place where she could give financially.
I was aware the whole time that the reason I'm able to access this great podcast for free is because other people are supporting. So when I had it in my budget to do so, I set up a donation so that I could contribute every month.
For Eva, supporting the show isn't just about chipping in for a podcast that she enjoys. It's about making sure the door stays open for the next person who's looking for a spiritual home.
The fact is that not everyone is going to be in a position where they're able to contribute financially, and we want this platform available to them. Quakers have never been ones to evangelize and try to convert, right? It's you go forth, you allow your light to shine through how you live, and people are drawn to it. But obviously, there are ways that we need to reach people in this day and age. And I just think that the podcast is really important for that.
That's why we make this podcast. We want this to be a free, accessible resource for the next person who bikes past a meeting house and wants to learn more. So if this show has been a meaningful part of your journey, please consider becoming a monthly supporter. For as little as $5 a month, you can help keep this resource available to everyone. Head on over to QuakerPodcast.com and click support. Thank you so very much. And now, back to the show. Welcome back. Before the break, we were looking at the sheer theological diversity held within Ireland Yearly Meeting. To hold liberal meetings, evangelical meetings, and everything in between together under one canopy requires an immense amount of grace and understanding. For lifelong Quaker Felicity McCartney, who grew up in a stricter meeting than she attends now, it comes down to a very specific posture.
I suppose I grew up not agreeing with a whole lot of stuff, but feeling it had a right to be there, you see.
She told me that maintaining this unity means holding fast to your own foundation while keeping your hands open to everyone else's.
I loved the quote I heard at Woodbrook. Rooted in Christianity, open to new ideas, so that people are ready to learn from other sources. But, we have a Christian background. I wouldn't want to get too hung up about it. I wouldn't want to reject anybody.
That grace, the willingness to coexist with completely different worldviews without demanding conformity, is what allows Freddie Higgins to find value in the tension.
I mean, Quakers are seekers, right? We look for the truth. And so, I don't think any human can say that they know the truth for sure. Why should I be clobbering someone's head with the Bible or with Quaker faith and practice, saying that I know the truth and they don't, And I'm making it sound easy, and it isn't always easy, but it's worth it, I think. It can be a struggle to talk to a friend who has theological differences, especially when they're very fundamental. But it's worth it, I think, for a community that is more accepting on every level, a community that can be closer together and help each other more without prerequisites.
When every other church around you is caught up in violent fragmentation, sticking together becomes a radical act of survival. Will Hare couldn't help but look at the scars of his own country to explain it.
I wonder sometimes, is it because we live in a society in Ireland which shows you the dangers of division and, dividing up on these things, the real damage. The scandal of what has happened in Ireland and the scandal of the Christian churches, does that make an environment for a little society like ourselves, tiny that we are, that actually just encourage people to realize, actually, in the greater scheme of things, we may disagree with our friends here, but let's stick together as opposed to, fragment ourselves. Maybe it's the environment of Ireland helps us as a yearly meeting to hold together. Because we see in the great scheme of things, our minor divisions or our minor disagreements are fairly irrelevant. And maybe that's a broader issue generally for Quakers around the world. We are in a hell of a mess. And can we afford all these, splits and factions and schisms, when we actually do share quite a lot of things together? So I suppose the question, I turn it around and say, well, shouldn't all Quakers feel more of this requirement to stick together?
In a world that is fractured and hurting, can a spiritual community really afford to split over its differences? For Irish Quakers, the answer is a resounding no. But declaring unity is easy. Actually, practicing it is incredibly difficult. It requires an entirely different set of tools. And as 18-year-old Freddie Higgins points out, these tools are built right into the way that Quakers do business.
I love that we don't vote. I love that you have to come to a consensus so that there is no sort of dictatorship of the majority, You have to come to a consensus. Everyone has to at least feel like this is fine, even if they're not like, this is amazing. And it teaches you to explain what you believe and explain why you want something to happen, and also when to let go, when to not be a control freak,
Preventing a dictatorship of the majority isn't just about trivial decisions or esoteric theological differences. When Ireland legalized same-sex marriage in 2015, religious bodies across the country immediately put out position statements, and nearly all of them were opposed to the referendum. Irish Quakers, however, took their time. Will Hare explains their process.
We've always had, I suppose we would describe as weighty friends, our friends from different parts of that who have, very committed themselves to keeping the connections across the yearly meeting. And when there's issues, they're the quiet people who kind of go and talk to people. We had an issue 20 years ago, complex issue around how we deal with same-sex marriage. And for, I think, probably 8 years, we were stuck on finding the right formulation and the right process there. But there were people of weight on both sides of the argument who reached out and found a way through. But what we have done, our agreement on the same-sex marriage, we agreed was, and it's in our instruction, is basically, yes, we will recognize same-sex marriages. If anybody's a registrar and they do not believe in it, they do not have to fulfill the role. We always have enough registrars so other people can do it. And each meeting can decide whether it will recognize a same-sex marriage. Now, I think the great majority of meetings would very happily do that, and many meetings have. But that compromise was very happily accepted by everybody, and is respected by both sides.
They didn't solve the theological debate. Instead, they solved the human one. They built a canopy large enough to cover everyone's conscience, allowing the liberal meetings to joyfully celebrate same-sex marriages, while giving the opportunity for some of the more conservative meetings not to violate their own convictions. It's a radical kind of grace. And as Freddie looks towards the future, they believe it's exactly what the rest of us are starving for.
The idea that every single human being has that of God within them is an eternal thing and an important thing. You know, there is so much war and so much hatred and so much disconnection from the earth. And I think Quakers have something to offer to all of that. You know, getting off your phone and getting kind of out of your own head but into your own soul, and also getting to experience other people. Like, Quaker community, to me at least, is very strong. It's when people talk about the kind of struggles of community as a young person, I think we have a lot to learn from Quakers, like friendship across age ranges, friendship across geographical locations, the willingness to help even when you don't know someone that well, just the lack of hierarchy. We have a lot to offer the world in that. I think there are a lot of people who, if they knew more about Quakers, might be more interested.
When I first stepped off the plane in Dublin, I was an outsider. But within hours, I felt like family. I learned later from my hosts that this ancient law of hospitality has been nurtured into the very soil for 10,000 years. But hospitality is more than just pouring a cup of tea for a stranger. True hospitality is staying in the room with someone you completely disagree with. It's looking across the aisle or across the silence of a meeting house and deciding that the light of God in your neighbor is far more important than the lines that divide you. As Freddie told me, it's not easy, but it's worth it. Thank you so much for walking alongside us on this journey. And a profound thank you to our friends across the ocean, Will Hare, Freddie Higgins, Alan Brady, Felicity McCartney, and Paul Mooney, for opening your doors and sharing your profound wisdom with us. If you're looking to bring some of these reflections into your own community, you can find the discussion questions for this episode, along with a full transcript and additional resources at quakerpodcast.com. This episode was hosted, edited, and produced by me, Zack Jackson, with help from John Watts, who also wrote and produced the music. The Quaker Podcast is a part of The Quaker Project, We are a nonprofit Quaker media organization deeply dedicated to giving Quakers a platform in the 21st century. Whether we're capturing stories in Dublin, Belfast, or in our own backyards, we believe that these quiet messages of peace and radical welcome are exactly what our fractured world needs. If you feel moved by the work that we're doing and want to help us to share more of this light, please consider becoming a monthly supporter. Just go to QuakerPodcast.com and click support in the top right corner. It takes less than 5 minutes, and your partnership truly means the world to us. And now, to carry us out, our daily Quaker message as read by Irish friend Rose Tobin.
Carolyn Treadway, 2006. Slowing down frees time and space for spiritual connection and reverence for life. We must act on what our deep hearts already know. All life is sacred. Everything is connected. From this space, we can create a world we are proud to leave to our children and all future generations. Reverence for life empowers us to take responsibility for and to care for ourselves and each other.
To get Quaker wisdom in your inbox every day, just go to dailyquaker.com. That's dailyquaker.com.